transferring to the machine rejected it. But I'm listening.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to read down these text messages to you that Charles sent between him and his dad. Okay. So uh, I'll just read down them. I have nothing to hide. I'll do the same. Realize now you were right about some stuff, but it was a very long time ago, and he did not want those things. He just wanted validation from Sergey and Martin since they pretended to care about him. Sergey is very manipulative, and Chris has little ability to protect himself from manipulation. Um, yeah. So, like I said before, Sergey is confusing the death drive with the life drive. He wants to, die and be reborn again, so he could be anything he wants to be. The idealized self has become the auto sexualized self, and it's really pathetic. He's not like any other trans person. I'm not making Sergey invisible. I'm making he's making himself invisible and then trying to steal resources from me because he wants to hold me responsible for any incidentals that he encounters in life, because he wants to make me emotionally responsible for his suffering. and 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 the thing is so does Martin as well. The reason why I can say all this is because they don't have the money to sue me. um, and they're too darn depressed about the election to see the good in anything. And the thing is, when life gives you lemons, well, you know what happens. You make lemonade. You make the most out of a situation. You don't take that sort of feminist subculture, that says I'm helpless, so therefore I'm powerful in my helplessness, because then I have the right to lose my emotions at everybody else, and especially if you're conflating your autistic confusion, with the experience of isolation in a Russian orphanage. um, you know you think that it's feminine. And this is what I would say to Sergey. You think that it's feminine, to take hormones to become more sensitive, more loving and loved, but you're not going to get that love. You got to work through your PTSD from the orphanage. You got to try and reclaim your masculinity. You were happy in Boy Scouts. It's like, and then you think that somebody has to start having gay sex immediately if they say they're queer, and you think that somebody has to transition immediately and chemically and physically to female in order to legitimately be female and stuff like that. But it has nothing to do with that at all. So the problem with Sergey is just he's playing a chess game, and he's just trying to take more pieces. There's no end to justify the means. He was gonna keep changing his pronouns every 2 weeks and say, "Hey, you can't find me," and I'd be like, "Come out wherever you are," and he'd be like, "You'll never find out what my identity is, because if you do find out what my identity is, then you'll know what I am, and then you can actually hold me accountable." See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Sergey doesn't want to be held accountable. He wants to be. He thinks that what he's getting is female empowerment by him telling himself he's strong when he's actually weak, and that and that and that essentially he has the right to believe that he can sexualize himself as a woman, like fetishize, so that he can masturbate, basically. And so when he has Kevin Martin have sex with him, he's actually imagining that it's himself masturbating with himself.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how is he able to perform that if he has
Good
severely
one.
truncated
And,
limbs?
and, and the
I
thing
don't
is,
understand that.
yeah, and the thing is, he needs really unusual, BDSM sexual practices and and sex toys,
Okay.
to actually make it work. He's trying to force it to work. He actually, has no relationship. Everything is just superficial. Everything is just transactional. I want this. I want that. I need that. Because I'm so deprived, and so I'm going to totally destroy other people, so that they yell at me,
Yeah.
and so that I have the right to yell back at them. It's provoking. It's just a mind game. Yeah.
Shit.
So anyway,
He scared me when I first met him.
yeah.
He made
Hmm.
me nervous because
Hmm.
it wasn't so much anything that
Hmm.
he would say, but it's
Hmm.
just the way.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I hate to say it,
Yeah.
but it's just the way he looked and shocked me, and
Hmm.
it made me nervous,
Hmm.
and it scared me. But I'm glad that I got to know him for the short
Yeah.
time that I did, and I miss him. I
Uh-huh.
really miss him.
Yeah.
So you tell Captain Fox
Yep.
not to try to keep working those hydraulics unless you
Yeah.
guys help.
And here's the thing. He thinks he has right to espouse lesbian feminism. But
Yeah.
the thing is, he's just a weak male that's been pounded down, and he does not know how to reclaim his masculinity, how to reclaim
Uh
the
huh.
the, the active phase of
Oh,
spirituality
stop
rather than the
cancel.
passive phase.
Uh
Anyway,
huh. Uh huh.
um, so anyway,
Uh huh.
okay, so I'll read down this text message further. I'm the only reason he was able to
Okay.
escape. I exposed I
Hey, good to
exposed
see you.
Sergey since he's too. Oh, okay. I exposed. Yeah. Okay. So Charles is saying that he exposed. Oh, Sergey's deception, since I, Chris, am too autistic to see it myself. Okay. Yeah,
Uh huh.
that
Uh
makes
huh.
sense. Well, I would say this is more of like uh, a cultural kind of autism, in terms of like, the cold institutionalness of the Catholic Church, basically, led me to think of everything in terms of institution, rather than having, say, personal relationship with God, and then of course making it analogous to personal relationship with people. And so, I can only think of people as like part of an institution. What is their rank and file? What powers do they
Uh
have?
huh.
How are they oppressing me? How are they aiding me to move up? I got to stop thinking of things like that. Um,
Uh huh. Uh huh.
that's the wrong way to think. And people are moving away from, what do you call it, the self interest, version of radical activism. They're moving towards, the cooperation through shared beliefs. In other words, a spirit of a law, rather than an institution, of an identity. Um, so, and of course, a particular leader's identity being projected onto the power of an entire group, so as to
Right.
completely
Right.
shut out all other ideas, all other identities. They act like in feminism, there's some sort of trickle down, to like the autistic male. But the fact of the matter
Right.
is, there is no trickle down, because lesbian feminism is saying that women are supposed to reserve all their resources for everyone else, and if you're not a total simp, in these leftist organizations, you will be
Yeah.
completely destroyed.
Right.
um, and the thing is, you're not allowed to have sensory sensitivity. Um, if they say they have a special education assistant, um, uh, everything you do is an outburst, and they're
Right.
supposed to de-escalate you. I said to this person, I don't need de-escalation. I am calm. I am not angry at you. And he kept
Uh
insisting
huh.
that I was angry at him, and he was totally
Uh
gaslighting me.
huh.
And I frankly think he should lose his credentials.
Uh
Anyway,
huh.
but Forget that for now. Okay, so the provided text snippets offer several interesting points for psychological analysis. Here's a breakdown for potential interpretations. Okay, so Charles says, I have nothing to hide. Uh, defensiveness, the initial statement, I have nothing to hide, can often be a sign of defensiveness or an attempt to preemptively counter potential accusations or scrutiny. Okay, so basically, all Charles is doing with his dad is he's just establishing that sort of defensiveness. He's trying to create a boundary using fear. So he's being fierce, if you will, saying that he can't be penetrated, basically.
Okay.
With outside thinking. Okay, reciprocity and trust or lack of. The immediate follow up, I'll do the same, implies a conditional openness dependent on the other person's willing to be transparent. This suggests a dynamic where trust might be fragile or being negotiated. It could also indicate a desire for fairness equal disclosure. Okay, so so the thing is, Charles's dad doesn't necessarily trust him, so he's trying to take the passive role, but like he's also trying to twist it a little bit so that he could possibly take the advantage later, if you know. So he's acting open, but he isn't really open to Charles. He's trying to have reservations. Okay, so he's setting boundaries too, but he's trying to do it more gently than Charles. So actually, Charles's dad is a little bit cleverer than Charles in this situation. Okay. Oh, realize now you were right about some stuff, but that was a very long time ago, and he did not want those things. He just wanted validation for Sergey and Martin since they pretended to care about him. Sergey is very manipulative, and Chris has little ability to protect himself from manipulation. Shift in perspective and acknowledgement. This indicates a change in understanding or a belated acknowledgement of another person's viewpoint. So Charles is admitting that essentially his dad was right, but that me, Chris, could not see Sergey's manipulation, and so Charles is making a good concession on my behalf, um, to try and win favor for me from his dad. Minimization and justification. The phrase, but that was a very long time ago, attempts to downplay the significance of the past situation. Similarly, he did not want those things, aim to frame the individual's motivations. This could be a defense mechanism to reduce guilt, responsibility, or perceived negative implications of past actions. Well, the thing is, see, Charles isn't just acting as himself; he's also representing me here. So Charles is sort of being my Christian lawyer, if you will, to his dad, who's like acting like God because Charles's dad is a man of God because he's a pastor in Japan, no less, as a missionary. Yeah.
Mama me.
Yeah. So any thoughts so far?
Motherfucker.
Any thoughts so far?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Say again. Any thoughts so far?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I would say.
Well, we'll put it this way: I'm reclaiming the masculinity that my parents did not allow me by not allowing me to play contact sports when I was at Catholic school. Everybody did basketball. They were not allowing me to be male, basically, and they were putting me on medications, and they were allowing me to be scrutinized. And so I connected the faith with the pathologization, and so I did feel like a woman who was being gaslighted, and that's the thing, traditional parenting in a way, I feel it's kind of almost analogous to incest in a way, but see, the thing is they had some traditionalism, but they also had some liberalism in terms of they wanted a transactional thing in order to make good on an investment. So they used their medical knowledge as if it was some sort of financial knowledge, and so the thing is, my mom was spending up the wazoo, but she didn't actually know what I needed as a disabled person. And every time I asked for what I really needed, she wouldn't give it to me because she thought it was wasteful spending. So because it was out of pocket, whether it was going to Janus school instead of Catholic school, with like real professionals rather than just parents acting as guidance counselors without a degree, and or getting a new evaluation, which she claimed costs around $3,000, psychoeducational evaluation, in order to get accommodations at Alvernia and also at Penn State Berks. Michelle Mitchell had to fudge um, the papers, to get me accommodations there because my mom did not know she was supposed to start a year in advance and fill out, Penn State's own disability documentation papers as opposed to just, getting reports from psychologists that have been put over the years. Yeah, has to be very specific reasons related to the school specific guidelines. Anyway, okay, so let's keep analyzing Charles's stuff. Need for validation. The core explanation that he just wanted validation from Sergei Martin points to a fundamental human need for acceptance and recognition. This highlights potential vulnerabilities and the influence of social dynamics on behavior. Well, that's not exactly true. I mean, I wanted validation from anybody, but the thing is, Sergey and Martin only validated me because they were so lonely themselves. And the thing is, they didn't actually know how to properly form relationships, and so they were just thinking that by feminizing themselves, they could become more sophisticated than everybody else, and then of course, as men, they had the right to criticize women as turfs, just by pretending to be the most vulnerable females. So the thing is, Sergey has to be consistent. If he wants to be invisible and steal people's resources, well, then I'm gonna go at him and make him invisible for stealing my resources, and laying claim, to the idea that I lost his immigration papers so he could be deported. Well, you know what? Now I'm starting to side with my mom and Richard. That Sergei should be deported back to Russia so that he knows what he has in America.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, because he's just such a miserable person, and and the fact of the matter is, I wasted so much Uber money trying to like nurse him back to life and trying to get him to stop conspiracy theorizing that he was going to be killed and I was going to be killed. And, well then fix your PTSD and stop being trans.
All you have to do is just dress up like a sheep. Dress up like a sheep, Chris, and follow him around going,
yeah. And so like, he made religion his drug, and then he started depending on everybody in the religious sphere, like Jake Zook and Mary Zook and stuff like that. And that's why he would rage at them, because he crossed the boundaries. He expected to be completely dependent on them. He expected them to house him without question because they were good Christians. But nobody has unlimited resources. And you know what? White people in rural areas, they have house rules, for a reason. And autistic people usually do not understand house rules.
Right. Wait, did you say white people?
Yeah. Well, especially rural white people, like Mennonites and stuff like that. So
Well,
the idea is you can't just you can't just pretend that it's your hotel or your restaurant or take anything you want from somebody's house. You have to be a little bit grateful and show that you are happy that you have a place to live.
Sure.
And yeah. So but the thing is, he didn't believe he owed anything to anyone, and he was just going through the motions of learning how to please people just so he could get free housing for somebody. So he was winning Dave Kovac's favor before he met the Zooks just by washing the dishes. And the thing is, he knew how to he knew how to suck up and manipulate the favor he won from the leadership, and then he would weaponize that against me and say that I had no empathy for a person like Dave Kovac, you know, who of course eventually showed that he had no empathy for all of us supposed adopted sons in this thing that I was calling a cult. But I realized the reason why I called it a cult was because I didn't know what I was talking about, because I was merely looking at the power structure, and I wasn't actually considering, I wasn't actually considering, the people, the depth of the people, as opposed to considering that they were following their self-interest in order to obtain power, from say vulnerable people or whatever. But it wasn't about that. They don't have unlimited resources to give, and Sergey has to realize that that nobody has unlimited resources for him just because he's super vulnerable and super helpless. That's not real femininity. Because females can also be very confident, very strong, and they can encourage each other, and they can pull each other back up again. But the thing is, he doesn't really understand the concept of always being under siege, always feeling under threat that cis women feel, or the need for comfort. The thing is, when he doesn't get that comfort, he freaks out, like uncharacteristically, for like a normal woman, because normal women can actually keep their cool way more than that, because they've learned to put up with a lot of nonsense from abusive men and stuff like that. Anyway, but the thing is, Sergey wasn't prepared for all that. So similar to Tara, he would sob his face off, or use a lot of marijuana, or yell at the top of his lungs at everybody and everything. What?
Does he smoke marijuana?
Oh, yes, he does. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. So the thing is, he thinks that the pleasures of life are the solution to his low self-esteem. Because he's numbing himself with the sex, and he's numbing himself with the female hormones, thinking that he's achieved some kind of superiority when he can start dictating for everybody what's reality, redefine everything for them in terms of his own self-interest.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's surrounding himself with the pleasures of the hydraulics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, he's working them hydraulics.
Yeah. But I mean, the worst part of it is, he actually thinks that because he's female, he's a lesbian, and that he's actually directing his energy exclusively towards nice women, if you will, which actually are himself, giving himself a blowjob, if you will.
Wow. I mean, I could do that for him. I could walk up to him and start blowing your heart at him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
With all my breath, I could stand there and blow on him. He won't like that.
Yeah.
He's looking for the other time.
Okay. So further down this conversation, attribution of vulnerability, labeling Chris as okay. Labeling Chris as having little ability to protect himself from manipulation can be seen as an attempt to explain or excuse his actions. It also raises questions about Chris's assertiveness, self-esteem, and social skills. Yes, and that's the thing. An article from the Atlantic says Democrats have a man problem. The Democrats cannot win over men. Men are switching, to Republican and so on and so forth, because they're invisible. And the thing is, if I would start a movement it would be feminism to benefit men. So we just do, drizzle, drizzle, as far as we just substitute.
Dizzle, dizzle.
No. There was like a sprinkle movement from women
I know.
trying to get everybody to realize, how unmarried women were suffering, and that and that their entitlement was correct, towards men to provide for them when men had been, beaten down to the ground, you know, by this complete exclusion, if you will, by some kind of misapplication of like, lesbian feminism that was not for everyone, and that was exclusively for the for a vindictive power structure. So to put it really in a nutshell, the only reason why Sergei identifies as trans is so that he has a fundamental right to be vindictive, so that he can attack and never be questioned and say, "Oh, trust the trans person." Well, what does that really mean? It just means the argument that nobody can argue against, because you can't find out what his identity really is. You can't know anything that he thinks, because he's always, being emergent with his opinions, and every day his opinion is better than it was yesterday, and he's just moving the goalposts so that you're bewildered and confused, instead of actually being able to attack his arguments. So he's avoiding the question every single time you try to confront him on this stuff. He's the reason why I had to leave Lebanon. Okay, so anyway, and now I'm taking back my assertiveness, my self-esteem, and my social skills, and I'm learning more and more. I'm learning how to simply use Google, and yeah. Let's see. Charles says, "I'm the only reason he was able to escape. I expose it to him since he's too autistic to see it himself. Savior complex and self-attribution. The statement, 'I'm the only reason why he was able to escape,' suggests a belief in one's own crucial role in resolving the situation." Well, the thing is, Charles has been through a lot. I wouldn't necessarily say that Charles is going back towards, saying that he's godlike again, but but I think he believes that he knows what's best for me. But the thing is, that's yet to be seen. I mean, we still have to hammer out the details. We still have to duke out everything.
Right.
But I love him, and I love his family, and my Pennsylvania resources are there, because everybody else is like, sort of like, turning a blind eye, except for, maybe one person within the political realm. But that's beside the point. The political goals are just going to be, put off. I'm going to give myself a break, and I'm going to try and learn about myself. I'm going to try and, diagnose myself, and I'm going to try to give myself therapy when I don't have, therapy available from another person.
Wow. So you're going to make a doctor's appointment with yourself?
Yeah. Okay, so
well, don't miss any of your appointments.
So about Charles, it says, "This could stem from genuine help or tendencies toward a savior complex, where one feels a strong need to rescue others." Well, okay. I mean, if Charles has a strong need to rescue me, it's because he sees how dire the situation is, and how essentially I'm getting nowhere in life. And the thing is, my whole perfectionism about being an intellectual and trying to, get more formal education and being successful and everything like that, that has to do with this video I was watching. You're being gaslit by generational wealth. But the thing is, you were abandoned by your family who had generational wealth too. I mean, and the thing is, it doesn't matter what they felt. You still felt abandoned. and
Yeah.
and so the thing is, maybe they were dumping, all the hardship of like their childhood onto you because they couldn't detect it. But anyway, um,
Right. Right.
okay, so here we go. Charles continues. Okay, externalization of responsibility. By claiming to be the sole reason for the escape, the speaker may be downplaying other potential factors or Chris's own agency, if any. Well, the other
Mm-hmm.
potential factors was, my mom was trying to get me to stay away from Sergey because Sergey was the one who made me, leave Millersville in the first place. And the thing is, he made me think that I was, part of some kind of elite group that was like the only Christians left in the world, and that that I was the one they were looking for. Well, you know what? That's the way they treat everybody. Everybody's the one
Right.
who they're looking for. They love bomb you, and then all of a sudden, they start making you follow like really strict rules, and then they make you skip your classes or skip out on whatever else you've had dedication to, and and.
Right.
And the thing is,
Right.
if you don't have experience with these sort of cult like thinkings, you're just going to get sucked in because
Mm-hmm.
you have these feelings of love. It's
Right.
it's like a drug because there's the chemicals in the brain, and
Right.
uh, and also notice that the cycling between love and hatred basically is what appears to make you know um, a psycho like Sergey um, really attractive to this sort of helpless version of empowered feminism, if you will. um, you know but he has to learn to be a guy, and he has to learn to treat himself the way the way that
Yeah.
a woman wants to be treated without
Yes.
having to transition to female.
Mm-hmm. Well, even though Sergey is making his bed in hell, the Lord is still with him, and
Yep.
the Lord knows that Satan is sifting him,
Yep.
that he might be brought to testing, homeboy.
Yep.
So he's going to be going through it for a while, but I
Yep.
think he'll be okay.
Yep.
He'll be all right.
Okay. Stereotyping and lack of understanding. The phrase, since he's too autistic to see himself, is problematic and demonstrates a lack of understanding of autism spectrum. Well, see, for Charles, it's not about that. See, he's just trying to defer to his dad by downgrading me, and I'm okay with that because I know what that means rhetorically, to somebody who's proud like Charles's dad. So
Right.
yeah. Perpetuates harmful stereotypes by suggesting that autistic individuals inherently lack social awareness. Okay, anyway. Uh, Overall psychological themes, interpersonal dynamics. The text highlights complex relationships involving manipulation, need for validation, and perceived power imbalances. Yeah, why does it have to be about power imbalances? Why can't we just stop saying somebody's oppressing somebody else? Because you know what? In classrooms, in grade school, they teach kids, it doesn't matter who did what to who first. It matters how we're going to move forward from this. I mean, that could even be applied to the whole Israel Palestine situation, and the thing is, yeah, of course, Israel should nail the Palestinians if they are not willing to move forward, if they are not willing to actually do a ceasefire when they say a ceasefire, um, uh, and that's the thing, if Sergey tells me he's going to care about me and be nice to me, well then he starts totally tearing down my character the next day. Well, I shouldn't necessarily have to trust him because I'm not going to waste so much energy infinitely tolerating his his rage and stuff like that, um but I did it, until I could not trust him anymore with the emotional resources, the invisible labor that I was spending on him. Anyway, attribution theory. The speaker is making attributions about the motivations and abilities of others, Chris, Sergey, and Martin. um, Yeah. So that's the thing. Um, I just don't understand how people like Sergey and Martin, can be so sugary nice and then flip over into this dark side, this sort of vengeful side, you know, uh, where if you you're damned if you do apologize and you're damned if you don't apologize. They want payment suffering. They don't want apologies. um, it's total Schadenfreude. Um, let's see. Self-perception and identity. The speaker's statements reveal aspects of their self-perception, including their role in the situation and their understanding of others. uh, uh, okay. Well, I innately trust Charles because Charles was finally willing to make some podcasts with me, and he was willing to actually you know get down to the nitty gritty of discussing like various issues about everything. He was going to really reveal himself to me, as far as like who he was and what he was all about, as far as like also acknowledging me and figuring out who I really was, underneath all of the, fundamental characteristics, because I'm a whole person and he's a whole person, and we shouldn't just be viewing each other, in terms of political bias. I mean, theoretically, him and I are like, diametrically opposed, you know, um, but the thing is, there is common ground, and it's not just because I want to take aim at Sergey and Martin. Um, it's because I've come to this conclusion over a whole lot of reflection and a whole lot of learning. And I've been asking the AI questions. I've been finding out more than ever about my own psychology and my problems with my family and friends, and and why I can't make good connections with people, who draw proper boundaries, and and also why I can't make good connections with people who do draw good boundaries, but are willing to let those boundaries down under certain cases in which we have assigned mutual value to each other, not just shared self interest in a group. Okay. And not just shared interest in like a sense of helplessness and identity, and a need to radically say put fear into some sort of enemy or something like that. Yeah, I'm not like that. um, that's where I have to disagree with the whole uh, uh, you know radicalism thing, that Celine was trying to teach me. um, okay, so and believe me, I do love Celine with all my heart, and I love what she's been trying to do. But of course, the institutionalization of Pennsylvania stands up, rather than the sincerity of it toward its own goals. It's it's lost the meaning thereof. It's just empty words. A form of godliness that actually contains no godliness, if you will, um, because it's merely power based. It is a systemic, um, corporate body lack of empathy, a a groupthink protectionism on behalf of the most dominant individual, who who is the most dominant vulnerable group. Anyway, uh, and also that person who happens to have a very charmed dream life, and lived in Philly, and got to engage in beauty sports. um, let's see. Uh, oh yes, and then of course, uh, when kicking me out of Pennsylvania Stands Up, also engaged in beauty rage, just like Sergey, the fake trans. Important considerations. Uh, okay. Social cognition. The text touches upon how individuals perceive, interpret, and react to social situations, including the recognition of manipulation. Oh yes, and that's the thing. They'll act like it was my autism or my unawareness of the rules in Pennsylvania Stands Up, and I'm like, no, I'm going to hold you to saying that you were a family and that you actually cared about the issues and that you actually cared about the people if you cared about the issues. And the fact of the matter was, you know, um, you acted like a MAGA, and you called Sergey basically a fake trans, a fake autistic, a fake Russian, and a fake Jew, and you acted like he was going through nothing, and that it wasn't worth it for me to try and explain to 7,000 people, what he was going through, uh, and you made 7,000 people, suddenly my enemy when a lot of them didn't really know who I was, and and somebody was gaming the reporting system and the rules, uh, for sport, potentially, MAGA infiltrants, but they're in denial. They want to keep the integrity of their group beliefs. In other words, trust in each other and exclusion of me. And so, the thing is, you know, if you I did have to start my own organization essentially because there were too many uh, exclusionists in there who had power, and that's the thing. If you include the exclusionists as as the uh, as the theory states, they'll make the organization exclusive to, well, in this case, people who had a charmed life were allowed to major in the right major, were allowed to get the right experience, in order to be looked upon as reliable, so that whenever they needed a break, it wouldn't be held against them, and then they would receive the benefit of the doubt, and they would have the right to express their emotions, and they would have the right to get burned out or exhausted, or you know, or say, you know, this is bad. So anyway, um, they would have said, of course, that Sergey was just making an excuse to act out of line at great expense to everyone else. And of course, because I repeated the things that Sergey had said, and of course, I also I also hate Sergey for trying to get me to vouch for him in his leftist conspiracy theory beliefs that were way too far left, even for a leftist organization. you know, uh, and and it was great expense to me, you know. So it was great expense to me from the people who held massive amount of power, and it was also great expense to me, by a person, like Sergey, who acts super helpless, and of course is like an over exaggeration of what the person in power did, at Pennsylvania Stands Up. Anyway, um, and of course, they think everybody's just making an excuse to act out of line at great expense to everyone else if they actually show any sort of, personal need. Um, and and they would say this in the name of safety, inclusion, and relevance. And then of course they would hope that someone like Sergey would be tackled by 5 police officers wherever he happened to be the next day, whatever he happened to be doing, and taken back to Philhaven. Well, now I'm of the opinion that maybe he should just stay in Philhaven because he's too unstable to to stay out of it. And the thing is, you know, he just keeps, talking about gloom and doom, and then and then he's like, "Oh, Chris, you've turned your back on me," and starts calling me, along with, yeah, I know. He and Martin just kept constantly calling me, and like they were demanding that I pick up the phone, and that's actually making me, not want to pick up the phone, and not want to call them back, because they're so entitled, to to my suffering. Anyway,
Man.
anyway, so yeah. And then, of course, I said before, even worse, Richard and my mom think that Sergei should be deported to Russia so that he learns that America is a great place. I wouldn't say that he should be deported so he learns that America is a great place, but I think he should be deported to Russia because he's just such a miserable person. Um, and the thing is, he says he doesn't belong here. He thinks that everywhere else is better. Um, see, he's inconsistent because he thinks that in a communist country that he would be totally provided for, but the irony is that in a communist country he would also be dead probably if he is correct. Except this is still America, and the thing is, you know, even if the Russians were helping Trump, there's no way that Sergei is going to be dead because there's still all kinds of backup systems to help him. And the thing is, the only reason why he'd be dead is if he took his own life, because um, he just can't. He's just not healthy enough. Just hasn't dealt with his implicit trauma um, enough to basically see the light, if you will, the good side of everything. So anyway, um, yeah, and see, before all this, I would have said, of course, it's not a real argument to argue that somebody who's ungrateful for America should go to um, the country where they came from, because that's emotional blackmail. But but at the same time, you know, I'm at my personal limit. Just sort of like David Horowitz reached his personal limit with tolerating, some of the some of the socialists or communists and stuff like that. And and the fact of the matter is, uh, there's not a whole lot of difference between fascism and communism, and also we've had evidence from the Russian defectors to the United States that certain leftist groups have been influenced by Russia, and so if they just sort of tweak it a little bit, then it's no longer like American leftists, then it becomes Russian leftists, which essentially becomes fascist, right? Right? Okay. Anyway.
Right.
Okay. Anyway.
Anyway.
So anyway, as far as what I want to accomplish, there's nothing transgender about bike and pedestrian advocacy. There's nothing transgender about humanism. There's nothing transgender about supporting the so-called deep state of the agencies against Russian infiltration. There's nothing transgender about making sure agencies are well funded and saying that poorly run, poorly working agencies are better than that agency not being in existence. Sergei needs to work through his PTSD, and then he will have no reason to make his isolation from the orphanage a feminine thing. Yeah. So, uh, so I think I said this before, but I'll just reiterate. They try to act like there's a Reagan-esque trickle down to men if you adopt feminism and be a simp or become trans. But there is no trickle down because lesbian feminism says men should be invisible and irrelevant, and that women who preferentially direct all tangible and non-tangible resources exclusively to other cis women should be the active dominant force in leftism.
The other sissy women.
What?
The other sissy women.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good one. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Important considerations. Context is crucial. Without more context about the individuals involved, okay, interpretations are speculative. Subjectivity, psychological analysis involves interpretation, and different perspectives are possible. Well, yeah, I'm trying to get more perspectives, but the thing is, Sergey and Martin only have one perspective, and that shows, that they're very, well, ironically, uneducated and and seemingly ungifted. If Charles and I actually, make something out of ourselves and actually improve our lives, despite going against the grain of everything, and with mentorship and with a traditional family connections and with traditional church connections and stuff like that, if we do that, then everything that Sergey says is basically bunk because he can only be negative. Anyway, harmful stereotypes. The comment about autism is a significant concern. Blah blah blah. Okay, all right, never mind. Okay, analyze using psychology. Okay, the provided text snippets reveal a complex interpersonal dynamic, likely within a close relationship, heavily influenced by religious beliefs and a perceived need to guide and support another person. Chris, here's a psychological analysis of the messages. Themes and dynamics. Moral superiority and judgment. The sender repeatedly positions themselves as morally upright and possessing the right way of thinking and behaving. Phrases like, I know what I know and I'm not going to compromise. Okay, that's, of course, circular logic. But, and a question of what kind of serious Christian would walk away from a seeker highlight this stance. Well, yeah, I mean, technically, anybody who's a quote truth seeker is a Christian. Anybody who's looking for any sort of savior figure is technically a Christian. I mean, like your savior figure could be Julius Caesar, but you're still conceptually a Christian. I mean, and that's the thing. We're looking at things in terms of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, in the sense that your century man appears every century, and it's the great man who helps remove a layer of the zeitgeist, and then finds a Volksgeist, and helps you resist the Weltgeist. The Weltgeist is the ways of the world. The Volksgeist is like your sense of nation. Like there's a Hebrew word, for that, like when you become sort of like a Moses figure, blah blah blah. I forget what it is. And then then you like develop Chabad and koinonia and all this stuff. But never mind. It's just. That's just me trying to sound complex when I don't really know what I'm talking about. Okay, and the question of what kind of serious Christian would walk away from a seeker highlighted. Oh, okay, yeah. So that's sort of like empty words. When somebody tries to make an appeal to like virtue, like seriousness, a purpose, or maturity, or authenticity, yeah, I call bullshit on that, because all of those things are based on like long-term neurological benefits of having like a high amount of resources, like generational wealth, if you will. And actually having the generational wealth, do something because they actually listen to what the person's needs were. But that rarely actually happens, I would say. And so we idealize sort of like hard work and maturity, and like living in the most exclusive suburbs and stuff like that, and you know knowing things about things because we become parents or become authorities of other types, and you know uh, even in like Pentecostalism, they pride being a prophet or whatever rank, like bishop or apostle. So see, they have to make up these levels for themselves because they actually have low self-esteem, and a lot of Christians are lonely because they keep trying to impose what they think is the will of God on you, and they keep telling you to you know to uh, to pray to God, uh, and He'll do something. But the thing is, they're just saying we want to do compassion at a distance. We don't actually want to take any stake in your life. We don't want to address you. We want to redirect and gaslight you, to this figure who we don't actually believe in, because we don't do the things that he would do. you know
Right.
and that's essentially sort of like the money making version of Christianity, which is essentially the whore of Babylon. um,
Yeah.
Babylon just means using religiosity for
Right.
material
Right.
gain. and
Wow.
and,
I
and,
like the
and,
way you
and
put that.
yeah, and that's why they use the analogy of the women of Jerusalem being corrupt, and having like bracelets and necklaces made of gold, and fine clothes and stuff like that, because it's not really about women. It's about people using this passive divine feminine version of consumerism. So you see, if you use something divine in a bad way, it's iniquity. So actually, they're putting a curse on themselves by essentially, like, metaphorically sexualizing themselves. So it's like being married to a harlot, if you will, if you want to use biblical analogies, if you will. but but see, the reason why they use that terminology is because they just assume that users of the Bible would be men, because um, men, merely by happening to have a male body, were given authority back then. And of course, nowadays it's not the case anymore a lot of times. um, that's great. Anyway, um, control and boundaries, conditional. The sender sets a clear boundary regarding Chris's behavior. If he turns away and chooses sin, I will not be a part of it. Okay, I'm focusing on the phrase "chooses sin." That's so. So all that is just is just classifying behavior, and, and then to begin with, classifying things as behaviors, so that we can know the difference between good and evil. So that's all Charles's dad is doing. So the
Uh-huh.
so the thing is, he's kind of being like Pilate. He says, I have the authority, but I'm washing my hands clean of this, and let it be your thing, because Charles, you don't know what you're talking about. But I'm going to let you find out for yourself, how bad Chris is. you know, uh, uh, Suggests conditional acceptance and desire to influence Chris's choices based on their own uh, moral framework. No, I don't think it has anything to do with desire to influence my choices. Uh, Charles's dad would have just wanted to, you know, um, uh, throw me off, um, uh, if I was, I don't know, unsuitable to be so-called, married to the church, or whatever value system he'd have me marry, metaphorically. Hey, there's one watcher. I wonder who it is. Anyway, um, can't see who it is. So anyway, uh, let's see. Savior complex and codependency. The sender firmly believes they are indispensable to Chris's well-being. Chris needs me as I'm the only person who can give him stability and a firm foundation. um, this suggests a potential savior complex where the sender feels overly responsible for Chris's life. It can also indicate codependent tendencies where their sense of self-worth is tied to being needed by Chris. uh well, that's the thing. I mean, Charles is pretty lonely, but it's not because he's, a good Christian or a bad Christian. It's because he's it's just because he happens to be autistic, and and he happens to need a closer bond, more than a lot of other people. Um, and and the thing is, in time, I think we'll learn to be able to tone that down, and we won't look so dependent towards people, and we won't seem so needy, and we'll learn to set appropriate boundaries, and we'll realize the difference between, say, a business and a charity, or or a government and a savior, um, you know, and so on and so forth. Yeah. It can also indicate codependent tendencies where their sense of self worth is tied to being needed by Chris. Okay. Uh, well, I don't necessarily believe that Charles is the only person who can give me stability and a firm foundation, but of course he has to act that way to his dad, um, and say that it's not Jesus Christ who does that in this case, because he needs to prove his worth to his dad, before he can start, say, talking about the faith values, if you will. Justification through religious beliefs. The center frequently uses religious principles. The greatest of these is love. Love is not critical or condemning. The quote about the least of these to justify their actions and belief. Okay, well, definitely, this is moral relativism, because because it's circular logic, because you have to know for yourself what love is, and what love is not, or what the least of these is, or what it's not. Okay, this can be a powerful way to reinforce their own perspective and potentially influence the other. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Projection and criticism of the other person. The sender accuses the recipient of struggling with judgment and harsh criticism. Uh, well, okay. So it's natural to accuse anybody, of judgment when they actually criticize you. So the thing is, just because somebody criticizes doesn't mean they're judging. I mean, they might be making a judgment call, but they're not judging because they don't necessarily have power over you. A judge has power over you. Somebody who's making a judgment call doesn't necessarily have power over you, but they're trying to be a professional in some way. Okay, this could be a form of projection where they're attributing their own judgmental tendencies to the other person. Also framed as an attempt to sharpen your iron out of gentle admonishment, which can be a way to deliver criticism while appearing helpful. Oh, sharpen your iron. Okay, yeah, that's definitely a patronizing statement. That that sounds like something that Charles' dad would say. Okay, question compassion. The final direct question, can you show compassion, is pointed and implies the sender believes the recipient lacks its quality. This further reinforces the sender's moral high ground. Can you show compassion? Yeah. Okay. So that's the thing. So Charles is asking basically an open question with an implied answer. So it's not necessarily completely, um, an open question. Um, so it's supposed to direct toward a certain direction. Okay, the one viewer left. Huh. I wonder if it was Charles, or I wonder if it was Sergey or Martin. Anyway, uh, or I wonder if it was uh, somebody who has power. Yeah, yeah. I won't speculate. I said what I said. Uh, let's see. Focus on personal growth, self-perceived. Um, The center mentions focusing on prayer for humility, wisdom, and discernment, suggesting a self-awareness and desire for personal growth. Okay, see, that's something that Sergey and Martin do not have. They do not have self-awareness and do not have desire for personal growth. They think because they're so because they're so poor me and so vulnerable that that they have no choice and there's nothing they can do except manipulate when given the chance um, because they've got to be rational egoists. But wait a minute, I thought femininity was about being vulnerable. But no, it's not about being vulnerable. It's about seizing power by being drama queen, in their case. So every time you want to get away from them, they have a crisis and they need you even more. And then you feel guilty. Yeah. And then if you comfort them, then they feel more, quote, feminine in a righteous way, if you will. Yep. Social justice is pampering them and making other people's do the work for their self-worth. Okay. However, the subsequent messages often contradict the same aim by exhibiting judgmental and controlling behaviors. Okay. Well, well, yeah, but the thing is, Charles and I, you know, uh, are just for once expressing belief, for once we're venting and stuff like that, because we've endured a lot, from Sergey and Martin's manipulative behavior. In fact, of course, me having to return to my parents' Pennsylvania house when they still had it, and having to give up my independence and having to give up my cognitive rights, if you will, in order to be able to have time to think for myself and arrange my room the way that I function, because you don't tell me how I function, I tell you how I function. you know you don't tell me what my needs are, I tell you what my needs are. But but of course, then some people say, oh, you're ungrateful, move to Russia. But see, the difference between me and Sergey, and of course, I realize I'm making a judgment call on this, but it's based on heuristics, based on what I've suffered, and based on what I've learned, and I've gone through a pretty rapid period of learning, and so is Charles. Charles is a different person, and so I'm glad to take counsel from him because he's doing with the support of his family and with the support of mentors from his church, with the entire support of a body of believers, not just people who are not just individuals who are isolated and following their self-interest and wondering why they're isolated after raging at everybody who they supposedly really care about enough that they expect them to alter their bodies in order to be cared about by them, and also do dalliance in a prostitutional way.
Throw caution to the wind, Mr. Potter.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Black and white thinking. The language used often presents situations in a binary way, turns away and chooses. Oh, yes, that's a statement like you're with us or you're with the terrorists. This can be a sign of less nuanced thinking and difficulty in accepting complexity. Yep, black and white thinking. Psychological interpretations. High need for control. The sender's desire to set boundaries based on their moral code and their belief in being the sole source of stability for Chris suggests a strong need for control in relationships. Actually, no. I would say that would be pseudo narcissism coming from an autistic person, because Charles would essentially, you know, uh, panic if he can't be, legalistic about things. But see, we develop laws or rules for each other, when we cannot know the way. In other words, the way is vague because it's supposed to mess with your expectations. Your expectations come from logic, come from come from, if you will, rational thinking about what things are supposed to be, what things are logical to happen. But the thing is, we have to have faith in each other.
But you know what the thing is, Sergey? Chris?
Yeah, what?
You know what the thing is? Because we're one and the rest. Since you don't miss your beat, you run for cover in the heat. Why don't they do what they say?
Okay, so answer me this: why do science people typically not understand the concept of faith? Do you remember why? Okay, I can try to answer that. So the reason why science people generally do not understand faith is because faith is knowing where you are and knowing where you're going abstractly, without without knowing without being able to predict exactly what's going to happen. See, the scientific mind tries to be logical and tries to predict, you know, say what's coming next, or it tries to back predict what happened before, um, based on existing system. But the thing is, everything is really circular logic, because some system came from some other system, and at the beginning of time, somebody decided, what all the parts of the system was. Um, you know, and so the thing is, we can be legalistic about everything that we're born into, and we can be a product of our culture, just like Jacques Fresco was saying.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
All right. Anyway, let's see. Low self-esteem masked by superiority. Sometimes a strong outward display of moral superiority can be a defense mechanism to mask underlying insecurities or low self-esteem. By positioning themselves as right, they may be seeking validation. Okay, yeah, it is a defense mechanism, but I'm not saying that Charles is wrong in using that defense mechanism, because the thing is, he should definitely give his dad a run for his money, because because uh, his dad is stuffed, full of his own ego typically, and doesn't think he can be beaten, doesn't think he can be approached with an argument. Generally speaking. So that's the thing. But the thing is, you want to challenge each other. You want to test the spirits, as the scripture says, if you will. Anyway, boundary issues. The strong sense of responsibility for Chris's well-being. Oh, and you know what that actually means? Test the spirits. It means test each other's personal constitutions to see if y'all can hold your ground and have personal sovereignty, because you have the right knowledge to know the truth, if you will. The truth about what is good and what is bad. Anyway, boundary issues. The strong sense of responsibility for Chris's well-being and the conditional nature of the support indicate potential boundaries. I'm willing to overlook that. Healthy relationships involve mutual respect for individual autonomy. I have no doubt that if Charles was here, he would automatically, correct himself and say, no, I don't mean that I actually, am an expert on what you should or shouldn't do, but I also want to help you explore. I want you to help you, find what I've found for myself. And see, this is vague terminology. This is something that a lot of, you know, really logical people, can't deal with, if you will. And that's the thing. So Sergey has really black and white thinking. Everything's, yeah, and so he can't deal with the subtleties of, not having any expectations.
Just
And-
like the old Michael Jackson song. It don't matter if you're black or white.
Yeah, and the thing is, I go down and down further in life, and yet still I'm happier and happier, because I'm actually, freer and freer. I'm, I feel like I'm losing everything, but I'm actually gaining everything because now I'm actually giving myself a break. I'm giving myself time, to be myself.
That's adorable.
Yeah. Okay. So communication style. The communication style is direct, assertive, and at times confrontational. Well,
I want to be free.
even when framed as general admonishment, this can lead to defensiveness.
Sorry,
And
go ahead.
okay, so yeah, Charles is of course trying to provoke his dad to be defensive, and then Charles can theoretically, pounce on that defensiveness. But of course, that would mean that Charles wasn't necessarily, winning the argument. It was just he was forcing his dad to make an error by making an emotional appeal and then provoking an emotional appeal in response. Um, Potential for conflict. The judgmental tone and the clear differences in perspective create a high potential for conflict and strained communication in the relationship. um, well, that's the thing. So Charles's dad is in the power position, because Charles's dad does have better knowledge because he's a pastor and he has lots of experience, and of course he had like neurological stability because he had stable resources of high quality for a long time to develop the right brain connections and stuff like that. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, next one. The additional text messages provide further insight into the dynamics of the relationships, revealing a history of conflict, perceived inconsistencies, and a power struggle. Here's a psychological analysis of these new snippets building upon the previous analysis. Themes and dynamics building on previous analysis. Accusation of hypocrisy. The initial message, you're living forgiveness towards me, but condemning him, directly accuses the recipient of hypocrisy. Okay, so I know why this is happening. It's because um, Charles's dad has to forgive Charles because he has to give the benefit of the doubt to the flesh of his flesh and the blood of his blood. You know, uh, the biological family is supposed to be, in theory, a reliable predictor of who is worthy of um, bestowed gifts by the authority of God. And then, of course, Charles' dad has the power of God vested in him, to make that judgment call because he has experience. Of course, he doesn't actually mention that outright. Um, but then, of course, Charles is pointing out, the inconsistency. And of course, in theory, it's not an inconsistency because he's giving Charles seniority because he knows Charles as an intimate family member. Because Charles is his son, is his flesh of his flesh and blood of his blood, and so on and so forth. So he knows him because essentially he has put his own spirit into Charles, and so he sees himself in Charles as Charles is growing up, and so he's able to reasonably predict what Charles is going to say. Religious scrutiny and moral consistency. The center uses biblical references with our tongues. We bless the Lord and curse man. This should not be, to highlight the perceived consistency, the perceived inconsistency in the recipient's behavior. Okay, so Charles is saying this to his dad, and this is Charles. Hang on a second. Let me chime in real quick. Hey Charles, I'm actually reviewing. Yeah.
I'm in kind of a loud place, but it feels really sketchy to me because I can't learn anything. So I just want to talk to someone I can actually learn something from rather than sit around.
Oh, okay. Well, the thing is,
No offense to them.
the thing is, I'm actually, I'm actually going through your text with. I'm actually going through your text with your dad.
I just on this flight, we're going to really talk about that.
Okay.
I'll figure out where I can go where no one
All right, fine.
interrupt our whatever.
all right, but stop interrupting the recording. All right.
I'm in an arcade building or something.
Okay.
Never been there before, so.
All right.
Don't really care about it really, but.
All right. Anyway, okay. So religious scrutiny and moral consistency. Center uses biblical references. Okay. Fear of reciprocal judgment. The message for what the measurements with which you judge others, so shall those judgments be used on you. Okay. So okay, so that's sort of turning it around. It's not exactly playing the victim, but it's actually suggesting that whatever's out there is the greater cop. So the thing is, um, it's suggesting that the ideal being, the ideal God, if you will, has the power uh, of natural law to arrest something that is acting outside of its natural causes, if you will. Yeah. And of course, we attribute that action to God because we just can't fathom that anything in in the natural science world could be capable of doing that on its own. So the thing is, there's miracles, and that yep, there's miracles and there's badicles, if you will, as I call them. So let's see, reinforces the center's focus on moral and religious principles as a basis for
Am I hearing
evaluating actions. Okay. Okay. So the thing is, you're using a small web of moral and religious principles to evaluate a situation. Now, of course, that's where everybody starts. But the thing is, when you start to get layers of meaning, then that's when you start to see multiple systems on top of each other, and not just that one system of evaluation. Fear of reciprocal judgment. The message for what the measurements with which you judge others, so shall the judgments be used on you, indicates a fear of being judged by the same standards the recipient is applying to others. This suggests the sender is aware of their own potential shortcomings or past behaviors that could be subject to criticism. Okay. So Charles is acknowledging that that he could be punished, but then he's also saying that because his dad has greater power, he has greater responsibility, and so therefore is the higher servant and could be punished more if he treats Charles bad, and then if he treats me, Chris, bad as the least. As like the the widow with the 10 copper coins or whatever.
Hey, yo, Chairman Chris.
Yes. What?
Sorry, I have to head out and make another call. I'm sorry to cut you short, homie.
That's all right. I'll stay on the line with Charles.
Okay, Chairman Chris, have fun.
Okay, thanks. All right.
And remember, Chris.
Yes.
Chris.
Yeah.
Remember, you're the only one I love, and you can't change that.
That's great.
Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, shoot. Huh. Where did Charles go, I wonder? Maybe he couldn't find a quiet place. Anyway, okay. Highlighting past behavior and lack of change. The center points out the recipient's alleged lack of progress in managing conflict. You tell me you've changed and you're growing so fast, yet you hang up on me as soon as you hear what you don't want to hear, just like you did years ago. Okay, so that's the thing. Well, I would say Charles if Charles's dad want to argue that Charles didn't change, well, then it's because the resources didn't change. But see, Charles actually changed his mindset despite the resources not changing, and so the thing is, Charles still might be a sensitive person, but the thing is, that's part of his autistic sensitivity, and that should be overlooked, as opposed to his actual long term ability to give attention to a problem. So the thing is, it's not that he doesn't want to hear what his dad says; it's that he just needs more time to think about it before being overloaded by more criticism. And that's the thing. Over time, me and Charles will be develop more ability to be criticized and take it in a positive way, um, and look at it as a chance for improvement, if you will. Okay, this suggests a history of communication difficulties and skepticism towards the recipient's claims of personal growth. um, Emphasis on past agreement and validation. The senator reminds the recipient of past agreements. You told me you were done hanging around with Chris. And acknowledgements of the senator's wisdom. Okay, well, my mom always used to say to me that I should have been done hanging around Kevin Kalla. I should have been done hanging around Sergey Fox or Kevin Martin, because the thing is, in a very similar way, Sergey Fox and Kevin Martin and Kevin Kalla were able to project a certain amount of ethos, because they were able to, put fear into me and make me think that I had, say, a personal relationship with some kind of godlike figure. And so the thing is, I was essentially made to adore people like that, because they would make me feel guilty, or they would make me feel isolated and left out. And so I would try harder to be included. And the thing is, the best person for me to be in love with is myself. And that's a very feminist thing to say, but I'm going to use it on me as a male. What? Oh, no, 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 no. No, we're talking about Whitney Houston. The greatest love is happening to me. I found the greatest love inside of me. You know the words. You know the song.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean she means.
No, 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 no.
That doesn't mean that that's exclusive to the feminine.
Look. If someone
should love yourself as a man too.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. I'm applying feminist principles to being a man, which is something that feminism typically cannot do, unless you're LGBTQ. But why should you have to be LGBTQ to give yourself the kind of love that women give each other?
Give themselves too. They
Yeah,
give themselves.
Exactly.
But they also have trouble doing that sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In other words, loving yourself is not exclusive to feminine.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I mean, yeah. Of course, Sergey wants the right to lose control all the time and think that the worst things are going to happen to him. Wants to be able to accuse everybody else of doing conspiracy theories when he's got the worst conspiracy theories himself. Wants to accuse everybody else of having bad thinking when he actually has bad thinking himself. He's confused because he's speaking with his traumatic self. He's not thinking with his genuine self, because he did not seek psychiatry before. I went and got help for years, and I know this is going to take a really long time for me to heal. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. I'm not saying that it's necessarily going to happen as a fact, but I have to have faith in my support stuff. I have to have faith in my support networks. And I think that is, the real basis of Christianity, having faith in a spirit of a law of love that you share with other people who are close to you. Anyway, You also confess that so much of my advice turned out to be right. Okay, so this is Charles' dad being a little bit manipulative here, and and saying, "Well, you yourself thought this, so you're being, inconsistent now." But the thing is, um, it's not that Charles isn't being inconsistent; it's that Charles actually did change, but Charles's dad fails to recognize that Charles changed because he simply wants to believe from the beginning that Charles can't change because of Charles's behavior. So the thing is, it's a fundamental attribution bias to say that Charles is who he is because of what he does. In other words, hanging out with the heretic Chris. um, Perceived inconsistency and shifting opinions. The sender expresses frustration over the recipient's apparent change of heart regarding their friendship with Chris. Now, I guess a short time with Chris, and you've changed your mind and decided I don't actually know what I'm talking about. Okay, so the thing is, it's a, it's an appeal to say Charles having some sort of impulsive thinking, some kind of really simplistic black and white thinking, in that he doesn't know something, when he sees it. Um, so I wouldn't say that Charles's dad is necessarily um, gaslighting him. I think Charles's dad is just expressing his his disappointment that Charles doesn't value his dad's opinion. Um, uh, all of a sudden, so it's a discontinuation of an emotional resource. This highlights a perceived lack of consistency in the recipient's judgment and evaluation of the center's opinions. Drawing a distinction between witnessing and friendship. The final statement: witnessing is different than
Leave
friendship.
that alone.
Uh, Witnessing is different. Okay, so witnessing indicates a position, an office, a power vested investments. So, in other words, they're wearing some kind of cloth or priesthood, if you will, when they're witnessing. So then they have authority because they're just displaying professionalism or a profession of faith. And so in other words, faith is supposed to be vague and abstract because you're seeing something holistically, and you're not making super exact logic statements, because that actually prevents things from being true, because the thing is, when you are making exact logic or scientific statements, um, uh, you can't apply truth to general situation. You can't generalize, and so you use generalizations as heuristics because that's the way that people work. Stereotypes can be meaningful, even though stereotypes can sometimes be bad. um, let's see.
Leave it.
Uh, Seems to be the center's attempt to rationalize and justify Chris's continued presence in the recipient's life, potentially contradicting the recipient's earlier decision to end the friendship. Okay, so that's the thing. So for like an autistic person, we don't realize stuff until much later than other people do, and so the thing is, you know, one night we might get a really good sleep, and then suddenly we wake up with this idea, to try again and make something better, make something right. We just don't know what we don't know, and we don't know how to know what we don't know. We're unaware that we're unaware, but then once we're aware, then we really know we're aware of something, and then we want to act on it
Leave it.
because it's taken so much to get to that point. Um, Not that it's correct just because it takes a long time to get to that point, but because it actually has a sort of functionality in our lives. So the thing is, Charles has achieved some sort of functionality in which he can fulfill his need for my company without necessarily negating um, his his need to try and bring me into the Christian fold. um, Psychological interpretations, building on previous analysis, feeling betrayed or undermined. The sender likely feels betrayed or undermined by the recipient's apparent reversal on the Chris situation. especially after having been told the friendship was over and that advice was valued. Okay. Yeah. So because Charles's dad actually has a bond with him, a neurological biochemical bond in the brain with Charles. Um, of course, he's going to feel betrayed. He's going to feel like pretty much abandoned. So, um, so the thing is, definitely as far as paternalism, you know, um, Charles's dad probably believes that he has infinite love for his son, and so therefore, um, uh, therefore he doesn't want that tie to be severed in any way. In other words, he needs Charles to implicitly trust him um, with Charles's entire life, since um, since Charles's dad has the knowledge and experience, and also Charles's dad has probably lived through things like this, and so, if you will, it's as my parents would say, a complex form of logic. I would say um, some really customized heuristics, if you will, to try and figure out a situation. Not that it's always correct, but it's correct a higher percentage of the time. Um, based on like repeated occurrences and studies and stuff like that. But of course, that also does have an exactness of logic to it, and so it actually causes a lack of faith or trust in the person's autonomy and stuff like that, and ability to grow and develop, if you will. And so, growing and developing, uh, more often than not, is not really all that sudden. But see, the thing is, Charles's dad perceives that Charles's growth is sort of sudden, and yet it wasn't really all that sudden. And Charles was doing some sort of cram sessions in order to get to this point. um, uh, let's see. Power struggle and control. The messages reveal an ongoing power struggle within the relationship. The sender attempts to maintain influence by reminding the recipient of past agreements and highlighting perceived inconsistencies in their behavior. Sensitivity to judgment. The sender's concern about reciprocal judgment suggests a sensitivity to criticism and a potential awareness of their own judgmental tendencies. Okay. Frustration with lack of perceived progress. Sender's disappointment that the recipient seems to be repeating past behaviors, hanging up. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Need for validation and recognition. Okay, but like what we do doesn't say who we are. Okay. Need for validation and recognition. Okay. Senders seem to have a need for validation and recognition of the wisdom, judgment. Okay. Well, that's the thing. So sometimes confusing, say the office with the vestments, with say the personal relationship. So so Charles's dad's duty as a father, being confused with, say, seeing Charles as an equal, seeing eye to eye, and just having a conversation with a friend, if you will, as opposed to having the authority of a parent, if you will. Potential for a dysfunctional communication pattern. The dynamic of accusations, reminders of past behavior, and attempts to control the other person's choices suggests a potentially dysfunctional communication pattern characterized by defensiveness and lack of mutual respect for differing opinions. Okay, yeah. So yeah, bringing up the past is always bad, and of course, they have to be accusatory toward each other. You always do this. You always do that. Because they don't really know each other all that well. They can only look at certain characteristics or certain behaviors, things to pounce on that they want to generalize to the entire person. Um, and the thing is, that's a really rapid way to game the system and try and gain control of the other person's mind. But the thing is, if you approach somebody as like an equal and just say, well, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? Just keep asking questions and just try to go deeper. Well, that's different than say, oh, you always do this, you always do that. You're never supposed to use you either. Um, uh, because that's accusatory, and that creates guilt, and basically like an unsafe environment for one person or the other. The center continues to position themselves as having a clear understanding of the situation and the right way for the recipient to behave. The focus on Chris remains central to the conflicts, suggesting a significant point of contention in the relationship. Well, I guess I'm a divider. Anyway, uh, these additional messages reveal a relationship marked by accusations of hypocrisy, history, communication difficulties, and power struggle centered around the recipient's relationship with Chris. Okay, yeah. So that's the thing. So it's actually suggesting that Charles's dad is doing helicopter parenting. He's away in Japan most of the year, and then suddenly pops in, and then he's supposed to be valued more than gold, basically, to Charles. So, but that's the way professionals are supposed to be, apparently. Because that's the way that head honchos act. They say their piece, then then they're worth their weight in gold or more, and then they just disappear once they have seen things to their liking, and then they serve their own needs. They fulfill their personal needs through the professional world. Is what they do, but they feel fulfilled. So there's also this assumption that they're fulfilling anybody who they talk to, since the grandeur of their profession is tied to their own self-worth. And so the thing is, they've worked so hard to build their identity around their profession that they forget who they are as an ordinary human being. They can't leave that profession. And so, they're going to experience a little bit of hell. And, everybody's a viper's brood every now and then. It's good to apologize for being a viper's brood every now and then. And, to realize that one has to clean the inside of the cup as well as the outside of the cup. And let me see if I can remember a little bit more of it. And remember that it's the gift at the altar that sanctifies the sacrifice, but it's not the altar itself. So, in other words, if you create an ideology out of an identity, as opposed to really acknowledging the meaning of identity politics, well, then you're going to, start excluding people based on that one ideology, that one way that is supposed to never be questioned. And again, it's the argument that can't be argued against. It's the omnipotence, omnipresence, and need for surveillance. The need to be able to essentially, well, I'll give the analogy of mandatory reporting. So that's essentially a form of surveillance, because the definition of surveillance means that you conceal your identity and purpose when you are watching somebody, so that you don't have accountability, and in many cases intend to do corruption, rather than just simply use the secrecy, to do neutrality. So usually when close-knit work groups get together, like triumvirates and stuff like that, with a huge lot of experience, they'll say it's because they all want to deeply share, their expertise with each other. And so, secrecy in say a getting things done context, and not a kicking out of a leftist family organization, two very different things, because this wasn't really an administrative decision, to kick me out of Pennsylvania stands out. It was a personal decision based on based on a personal bias and a personal lack of knowledge, and also the lack of awareness that I already was a targeted individual and attempting to ignore the fact that I'd be put under more stress um, because because of the callous disregard of my lack of safety to begin with. And so um, the person who kicked me out of Pennsylvania stands up would actually, it seems, like me to be more unsafe than I was before and more hounded by, um, you know, fake law enforcement and also real law enforcement, for doing nothing, but actually trying to tell people to be nice and, asking people why there was poor communication. And I would say the stupidest thing is that the communications officer has nothing to do with communications whatsoever. It has to do with going to television stations, going to radio stations, and telling them how great we are, instead of actually being great, magnanimous, and actually, developing a relationship with people. And that's the same problem with the mainstream Democrats. That's even the same problem with the secular Democrats, and that's also the same problem with a lot of atheist groups as well. Um, of course, it took a supposed trans person like Sergey to find that out, but I mean, I can still use that information, and I can still um, hate Sergey. because because essentially it's for his own good. Okay. Senator feels that past advice has been disregarded in the judgment questioned. The use of religious arguments and the highlighting of perceived inconsistencies in the recipient's behavior underscore the complex and potentially strained nature of this interpersonal dynamic. The senator appears to be deeply invested in influencing the recipient's choices and maintaining a position of moral and intellectual authority. Okay, so that's the thing. Well, okay, so I was critical of Charles's dad before because I thought, intellect is everything. Um, and I thought, there's a lot of emotional appeals. There's a lot of logical fallacies in Charles's dad's argument about creation. Um, and the thing is, well, that doesn't necessarily matter to me so much. I mean, of course, I'll double check. I mean, there's always room for refinement. But the fact of the matter is, I was supposed to, respect, if you will, his garments, so to speak, in that moment, and then, of course, do my own reflections later, because, of course, if it is really Christianity, you are supposed to do your own reflections, and then you're supposed to, develop a relationship with the Spirit of the Lord, blah 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 blah, blah. And of course, the Spirit of the Lord is the Lord. Um, and of course, all God really is just a set of rules that that essentially manifest in materials in the world, um, but of course, um, the materials aren't the main point of it. The real thing that's supposed to manifest is better thinking, and then you develop. If you develop a heart for God, then you develop a mind for God, supposedly. So the idea is you just have to have a willingness to learn, and you have to have a willingness to, think through things, reflect on them, and at least be like Joe Rogan, who does a 3-hour podcast. Um, even if he's using poor thinking, he's actually trying to think through things and talk with people whose viewpoints might be, different than his own. He's just trying to get down to the bottom of it, at least comfortably. He's not claiming that he necessarily knows the truth. He just wants to be a good questioner. And so he's actually sort of using, if you will, a Platonic method. And then he's trying to get to that state of euphoria or whatever it's called, where y'all have this sense of unknowingness. And then you sort of have to develop, a way to sort of see through the muck in sort of like a vague way. So that certain things are true for certain, um, you know, but not so specific that they're trivially true. So you need divine masculine and divine feminine, if you will. Mhm. Okay. Uh, yeah. Okay, I already did that one. I better just keep moving. Where was I? Okay. Uh, here we go. Here we go. The latest set of messages continues to reveal a complex and emotionally charged interaction, heavily influenced by religious beliefs, past grievances, and a strong desire to influence the other person's perspective. Here's a psychological analysis of these additional snippets. Okay, grievances. Okay, so basically, somebody's held down so far that they can't see any way out of the situation, and they're just struggling and struggling and struggling more, and and then they finally figure out that they've lost everything and they have nothing to lose. Okay, so um, that's like essentially the way that say white supremacists use their helplessness, like the feminists theoretically are supposed to do, so that everybody gives them resources in order to fight bigger powers because they care. Okay. um, and the whole idea of having to seize literal power in this world is not real power. I would say you have to rend not your garments, rend your hearts. See, you shouldn't be always trying to obtain new garments. You don't need to obtain big degrees. You don't need to obtain experience. As far as experience that's acknowledged by, say, the people on LinkedIn, as far as a job, an ordinary W-2 profession, because that's not really a profession of faith. That's a profession of the institution that gave you the faith. So you only have faith in a corporation because you lived a charmed life before. And that's what I have to say to a lot of people who are slaving away at Pennsylvania Stands Up. And it's unfortunate. you know Kudos to you for doing everything that you can, but the thing is, your method's not working, just like the Democrats method is not working. um, you push people away, because you don't have the resources to accommodate people. And the thing is, look at you. Pennsylvania Stands Up cannot, uh, pretty much cannot get any Jews in it, Catholics in it, Muslims in it. Um, you've got no Hindus, you know, uh, and you're hard pressed to find any UUs in it. And you know, this is why. It's because everybody's got to be a workhorse. Nobody can go for afternoon tea. And this is what I was saying to Tanya. I was so grateful to Tanya that she actually wanted to do something outside of business. And Burke Stands Up, as well as the whole of Pennsylvania stuff, stands up. It's what they used to say at MLMs: we're a business, not a charity. We're here to start a business. You want to come to this meeting? We can only talk about business. We can only talk about adding more people to the chain. So it's so spiritually, it's a Ponzi scheme. So we only basically, find more fulfillment just by adding more people to the mix and having more workers in the vineyard, so to speak. I really do think that Pennsylvania Stands Up operates as a religious corporation, um, if you will. And and the thing is, the second set of rules that Emily had sent me, um, the operations director, it did look like it came from a faith-based organization. And then I was thinking, the executive director, whose name is like Carrie, I think, or something like that. Um, she actually has done a whole lot of faith-based initiatives, and so the thing is, she might actually pretty much be a conservative Christian, um, who will do like interfaith things and and say we'll focus on, say, uh, respecting the differences while actually um, emphasizing her own differences in order to well, seize power and be powerful in a um, passive aggressive way. Yeah, and so I had when when I first knew that I had been kicked out of Pennsylvania Stands Up, I thought, well, gee, everybody's giving me silence, and I was being given for silence for 3 months. So the thing is, after a week goes by, you're like, okay, I can give them the benefit of the doubt because they ordered me to give the benefit of the doubt in the rules. And then 2 weeks goes by, a month goes by, 2 months goes by, 3 months goes by, and then you start to realize, hey, I'm being used. I don't want anybody else to be manipulated like this. um, you know, I do want to start my own organization because I believe I can be, more empathetic and more compassionate than than these people who just assume that people are uh, whatever they do. And I've been classified like that all my life. And the thing is, they just can't stand that anybody, has emotional needs besides themselves, and you know, uh, and they're so fragile that they're going to let each other, completely lose control. What's that song? Don't let go. I have the right to lose control. I mean, and that's a very feminist thing to do, but you know, uh, put those words to a male body, and then suddenly, you're the devil, and and uh, and you have no right to speak, uh, because some people are permanently defined as harmless and vulnerable, even though they're in the power position, they have the degree, they have the experience, they have the adoration, because they had some form of abstract degree and experience before, some kind of privilege in which they had neurological and biochemical stability. And they knew, when their next transaction was coming, and they have the right to expect their transactions to be honored as professionals because, they get the most important seats at banquets and stuff like that. And they love being addressed as, whatever their title is. Anyway, themes and dynamics, further building on previous analysis. Direct accusation of lack of compassion. Conversation opens with a direct and challenging question: can you show compassion? This immediately puts the recipient on the defensive and frames the sender as possessing a higher moral ground. The follow-up: if not, you'd better seriously uh, reevaluate where your heart is right now. Okay, so Charles is questioning his dad. He's saying that he's got the new way to view things, and that and that his dad is being like too black and white, too legalistic. Um, of course, even the whole of Christianity, evangelical Christianity, tends to be very black and white. As far as, like, say, for example, the uh, the Redingburg's Council of Churches, repeatedly not allowing the UUs to join the Council of Churches because the UUs are not considered a Christian church, ironically, because they are accepting of other people. And then, of course, the usually conservative Christian argument is that, oh, we're not here to accept people. We're here to show them compassion at a distance, because um, uh, if they choose sin, well, then of course that means it's an either or fallacy. It's a you're with us or you're with the terrorists kind of thing, and it's this bifurcation is, of course, used to decide who to marginalize and who to not. But see, the thing is, you have to accuse as many people as possible of sinning, of doing the wrong thing. Otherwise, you can't save face in front of other people and be looked upon as more holy. And so that essentially makes you a doctor of the law. Say, even if you're liberal, they'll call you a Quaker Pharisee or a weighty Quaker. If you have to be really legalistic in order to ensure fairness and inclusion and whatever you would expect, at a leftist organization. And so the thing is, I'm not the one who would be excluding, um, because the thing is, I I belong to a group that has not yet been, really acknowledged by the Constitution yet. Um, and so the main gripe of Pennsylvania Stands Up um, is that white cis females are still the the dominant vulnerable group, and nobody can question that. If they are the most suffering, if if uh, if they are the most woe is me, I'm so helpless, um, in that all the people with all the big guns in the world have to come to my aid and have to totally destroy someone else for my ego, well then, so be it. Even if I'm supposed to, consider those people, my ideological enemy. So that's a manipulation of definitions. You don't actually, believe in policing or no policing. You don't actually believe in social justice. What you believe in is manipulation of definitions based on how you feel at the moment, because you just don't know what you're talking about, because you don't see the value in something that's less than you in society, because you think normal people um, are like you, that have the charmed life that's being taught about in this "you're being gaslit by generational wealth" video. Anyway, uh, let's see. Attribution of divine authority. The sender claims everything I'm saying is not of me. Oh, okay, yes. And I would also say that, the upper Pennsylvania Stands Up people would say that essentially they were quoting from a higher power or a higher law, if you will. They would say, "Oh, this is out of my hands. I have no choice. Um, uh, I'm really a nice person, but I have to do this because I am the law." So wait a minute. If you are the law, then then you do have a choice. But the thing is, you're trying to be really legalistic about your profession and pretend that your personal feelings have nothing to do with your profession. And so you're actually twisting the idea of a higher power, because it is not giving you rest. It is actually making you restless, is making you anxious, It's making you paranoid. It's making you want to constantly evaluate people, surveil people, and destroy people for sport, basically. Anyway, uh, yeah. So you're telling me basically go to God, or of course in your case, lesbian feminism. uh, so that's your God. That's your Bible. That's your Word made flesh. That's the power vested in you. uh, this suggests they believe their words are divinely inspired or aligned with a higher moral authority, making their perspective seem less like a personal opinion and more like a moral imperative. This can be a powerful tactic to influence and shut down dissent. Oh, wow. Yes, the patronizing tone. Yes, you'll have to find somewhere else where you can gain power. Of course, you know, mocking my, learning at the leadership conference, um, you know, as if, oh, you and I both know blah blah blah. That's a Sergey technique. You and I both know blah 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 blah. This is between me and you. This is not between me and a higher power. Um, Everything you say is going in one ear and out the other. Uh, you are going to listen, and I am going to speak. I'm the vulnerable one here, and 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 I'm going to tell you what the truth is. you know, it's um, and I don't know why. I didn't see it at first. How Pennsylvania stands up could potentially be like the Pentecostal charismatic group, and and you know I I thought that by taking things up the chain and saying nobody's talking to me would actually get some results, but it actually made them think worse of me because of the way that they perceive somebody who simply wants good communication um, and simply has you know special needs. And so the thing is, they I don't know. Yeah, they displayed white supremacy. Um, and so whatever, I was a fake trans person. I should have I should have never, considered giving up, my masculinity for a person like Sergey. you know. Um, I should have never had to, think that I would need to either simp or feminize myself in order to be accepted by uh, by Celine, who I adore. Um, anyway, uh, and of course, uh, her husband is kind of like, I would say, a medical doctor type of person, because see, he's able to broadcast his status far and wide. And the thing is, there's sort of this elitism in being married to a person of that stature who has good community rapport. And you know what, it's good for the organization. But the thing is, there's just been too much pressure to obtain productivity. And and you know what, I was absolutely right about Pennsylvania stands up becoming like Walmart. Work harder, work faster, dig boys, work boys, all this is mine, 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 like Radcliffe from Pocahontas. you know like the Lion King, where Scar says, uh, you're not looking hard enough to find food. And then the lioness is like, there is nothing left. And then Scar slaps her. And then also, going back to Radcliffe and Pocahontas, I think I think he also says something like, there's no gold. You're not digging enough. Um, and then, of course, uh, And of course, Ratcliffe is the one who rushes to action, to try and shoot before thinking, because he's he's all authority and no brains. And so the thing is, he thinks exerting authority is real brains. Authority to, serve his own needs, use a group to serve his own needs, and obtain, the gold that he needs. So he has this sense of achievement in colonialism, if you will, the white man's burden. And so basically the only difference between a total chauvinist organization that never lets white women move up, and Pennsylvania stands up, is that essentially white women have taken the role de facto of white males. So so basically these are women and their simps who are acting in the active role. The action phase of the yin and yang, rather than the passive, divine feminine thing. So the thing is, maybe they do have a balance in which they have really good memory, um, and they also have really good action after that contemplation. But no, I don't think so, because I do think they actually acted somewhat impulsively, and I do think um, that they're nothing compared with Claire's 25 years of research in autism. Her son is doing fine at the county and everything, um, and that's the way things can be done in conservative society, because of course conservatives tend to you know, uh, suck things up and just find the ways that work. They make something out of nothing. Whereas whereas it seems that you know liberals have to obtain power in order to have self worth. And the thing is, um, I have reached my personal tolerance limit for the um, for the appearance of authority and the appearance of sophisticated knowledge about inclusion and safety and and being welcoming and stuff like that. It's all a marketing ploy. It has nothing to do with those things whatsoever. Passive aggressive religious intervention. The statement, I'll pray for you, can be interpreted in multiple ways. While it might be a genuine expression of care in this context, following accusations of a lack of compassion can also come across as passive aggressive, implying the recipient is in need of spiritual correction. Oh my goodness, that's exactly the spirit with which Emily Pratt sent that email to me about, finding my own way of obtaining power. You just can't do it in our organization. You don't have to leave, but you can't stay here. uh, and of course, I know who I want to take me home, and of course, it's her ego, it's her pride. Anyway, it's not a genuine sense of, you know, uh, feminine or masculine love. Where was the empathy? It wasn't empathy. It was legalism. It was professionalism. Professionalism tainted by a personal bias and a lack of education. Okay. Use of scripture as a weapon. Ooh, use of scripture as a weapon. The rules, the second set of rules, which was supposed to explain why the first set of rules was paramount. Well, the thing is the rules for Slack were not the Old Testament, and the rules which were presented to me by Emily Pratt in the email were also not the New Testament. There was no rhyme or reason whatsoever for her presenting me with a second set of rules. Um, because really she was just trying to brush me off because all she cared about was winning. She was hired to do a certain job and she did it. She needed to use authority as a last resort because she and the other, authorities in the group were really incompetent most of the time. So it was a helicopter parenting. They could not handle their jobs. They were too overloaded. They do not know how to relate to people because they need to make their money first. They need to do their fundraising and their phone banking just like the mainstream Democrats, which they love to hate. And actually, some of the mainstream Democrats seem to be, more compassionate, at least at a distance, because I want to say, they're more realists. And so, I feel like that Pennsylvania Stands Up is some sort of trickle down fantasy world. They're listening to that C-suite as if the C-suite is Ronald Reagan, and you have to vote for Ronald Reagan if you want to be considered a good Christian, in this case, a good leftist. And that C-suite steals the resources and then the physical and mental health of everyone mercilessly, for an ego trip. So it's as if Elon Musk is in charge of Pennsylvania Stands Up. How can we trust, these MAGAs to run supposedly a benevolent, caring organization? Oh yes, that's the thing. It's the whole left-hand path, right-hand path. They always so don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Really means that you're pretending to interpret, your words of love in terms of, handing out the olive branch and being the peaceful dove. And then, of course, your left hand or the left hand path is actually, essentially carrying the wrath of God, like the spears in the eagle's hand on the dollar, as opposed to the olive branch. So, it's like with one hand, you're shaking hands with somebody, but with the other hand, you're ready to strike, but that's because you need to be, a public parent to everyone else. You need to believe that, what you've experienced as an upper middle class elite who's never had any problems in life and has a perfect career, basically. um, you think everybody has to be like you automatically, immediately, and completely, without ever, having learned anything. They're just supposed to read your mind and make you feel better about yourself. Anyway, the instruction to read Proverbs 13:10. Pride only breeds quarrels, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Of course, as if the advice of the person who's doing the aggression is paramount. And of course, as if the person who is bringing up a legitimate concern is merely trying to bring up a quarrel, only trying to create conflict or chaos or whatever unvirtue you want to label it as. Shifting focus to personal change and past support. The sender prompts reflection with think about how you have changed, how I have changed. This could be an attempt to appeal to shared history and encourage empathy. Oh, yes, that's another surrogate appeal. I know this and you know this. Um, no, the other person doesn't know that. It actually takes them a good deal of time to try and compare the two things that you know. So you don't necessarily, you know, you can't necessarily blanket generalize that everybody knows what you know and and knows exactly how to put that knowledge into action. Anyway, this could be an attempt to appeal to shared history and encourage empathy. The subsequent message about the sender's past vulnerability. Okay, so encourage empathy. So the thing is, Charles's dad is trying to get him to to give empathy towards Charles' dad. Oh, now I'm so loving. Um, uh, so now maybe you will think differently of me, um, because I've recognized that you've changed. But this could come across as patronizing because because he's he's saying um, yes, you know things, yes, you have changed, and so because you have changed, you should agree with me. The subsequent message about the sender's past vulnerability. When I was at my worst, you encouraged me. And their act of forgiveness, and I forgave you for the things you did to me in my childhood that you forgot about. Okay. um, oh, okay. So maybe it was okay. So maybe it was Charles who said, "Think about how you've changed, how I've changed." That it definitely sounds like Star Wars, where he's like, "Search your feelings, Father. You know it to be true." He says it back to him. You know, you once were my father, Anakin Skywalker. Blah blah blah. This could be an attempt to appeal to shared history and encourage empathy. Okay. When I was at my worst, you encouraged me. You were my strength when I was weak. Because you believe I'm everything I am because you love me. Okay, anyway, let's see. And their act of forgiveness, and I forgave you for the things you did to me in my childhood that you forgot. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like traditional parenting. I I basically, I have all kinds of choice words for traditional parenting. Um, but you could call it abuse, you could call it terrorism, you could call it manipulation, uh, you could call it slavery. It's free labor. uh, what other word did I use for traditional parenting? I don't remember. But that's the thing. It's just a fact of life, that people with low resources and low education have to use traditional parenting when they feel that they have no choice to obtain productivity from their kids. Because they don't really know what a kid means. They just sort of popped one out. But I also would never criticize, you know, uh moms for trying to be moms, um, as far as say the ones who are struggling with, say, a kid with a serious health problem, and or are worried about their weight, and or worried about the image of moms, presented as like Stepford wives, or whatever. Oh, and then of course a whole bunch of men criticizing those moms for being moms because they think they're useless because they popped out kids. So I don't necessarily, support the idea that women are useless for popping out kids, because everything about everything about religions is essentially manipulating women to pop out kids. and everything about government is basically manipulating women to pop out kids. Um, but there's the idea that the husband is joined with her as one legally, even though that doesn't actually happen, because the husband doesn't actually experience the pregnancy unless he's paying her bills or paying for child support. So these are all legal abstractions and stuff like that. Um, you know, uh, they have no basis in reality. Like we experience biological sex, um, but it's not the most important thing in the world. The limit approaches zero. At the same time, uh, I will assert biological sex in the case of, arguing against somebody like Sergey, just because his arguments are too chaotic to be coherent. uh, let's see. Uh, this seems designed to evoke guilt or a sense of obligation on the recipient. Okay, so yeah, so Charles is saying, remember your office as father to me. Hmm. You're a parent, but you're also a parent. So you don't simply get things out of me because you're a parent. The other definition of a parent is you're supposed to provide me with things. And you're supposed to ask me what I need instead of simply saying that you know what's good for me. Because if you knew what's good for me exactly, then you would be God. Because God knows what are good gifts for his children, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay. So, emotional manipulation through what if scenarios. The question is, what if I hadn't? And what if you never showed compassion for me? Um, uh, okay. So those are open-ended questions, but translation means, so what? I don't give a shit. Uh, Clear attempts at emotional manipulation. There we are. They highlight the sender's past actions of forgiveness and support, implying that the recipient should reciprocate that passion. Oh, yes, that's that's the um, that's the permanent condition of say, um, you know, uh, uh, well, typically a white person being infinitely loving and infinitely caring, uh, and being infinitely good, you know. uh, so as to never have to deal with actual Democrat issues, even though a person is a registered Democrat. And so, like, why are you a Democrat if you don't actually believe in treating people nice? That's the essence uh, of liberalism, the idea of liberation, the idea of being free from having to, destroy people's lives in order to, establish some kind of sense of order in your own mind. um, so anyway, uh, so then of course, when it becomes a form of social policing, that has nothing to do with civil law or the rule of law, well then, um, that's when it becomes arbitrary and authoritarian. um, yeah. Psychological interpretations further building on previous analysis. Heightened emotional state. The direct accusations, appeals to divine authority, and emotionally charged questions indicate a heightened emotional state in the sender, likely feeling hurt, frustrated, or morally indignant. Oh, the righteous anger of the father figure. Like Dave Kovac was to us supposed adopted sons. And the only reason why I saw it as a cult was because I saw that the power structure was flawed, and the thing was that it was arbitrary. I mean, it seemed as arbitrary as the Catholic Church, because I wasn't getting what everybody else was in the Catholic Church, because my parents did not provide me with a car, to commute to all of the different young and old Catholic things, for example. And of course, everybody just was not aware that I could not afford things, that I was poor. And I also looked bad to the Lancaster Democrats too, and especially to Greg Paulson, who said, oh, it's nothing to bike all the way from Lancaster to York. Well, I would have been biking from Effort to York. And it's like, oh, I don't care. You can do it because, you're athletically fit, and, you're our, slave for, like 6 election cycles, blah, blah, blah. And you should know that we do all the talking and you do all the working. Okay. All right. Well, then, of course, I questioned like Dot and Joanne about why teachers union people are so stylish and have to live in secret suburbs that only cars can get to, and why do you have to be so far out and think that other people don't deserve to live in what do you call those high-rise apartments in your single family home neighborhood? Just a guess. Why poor people don't have rights. But you do, because everybody's like you and everybody thinks like you. Okay, whatever. Oh, yes, because you do all the hard work in the background. You do all the fundraising and you do all the phone banking, and you make sure that everybody who needs to contributes $1,000 a plate. And yeah, and that's the stuff that, of course, needs to get done. Secular Democrats of Berks County. There's no further discussion. Anybody who talks outside of this very specific area of relevance is a bunch of bullshit. And 3 leaders of Pennsylvania stands up who ignored me when I joined your conversation and admitted that I had criticized the secular Democrats. And of course, you acted like I wasn't there. I was right. You were acting like management at Walmart. You are not able to relate to the common person. You are not allowed to let anybody else speak because, you're the expert only because you're the most aggressive. So, yeah, if you will, even the men, so to speak, be man like woman. I don't know. Go and act vulnerable the one moment, and then come down hard on everybody who hurts your ego a little bit. Just like the Old Testament God. Oh, don't mess with me because I'm God. You don't question God. We have no time to be like Jesus. We live to condemn. It's what we do. Anyway, desire to induce guilt and obligation. The detailed recollection of past support and forgiveness, coupled with the what-if scenarios, strongly suggests an attempt to induce guilt and a sense of obligation in the recipient to align with the sender's views. Oh, yeah. Actually, yeah. The what-if questions are pointing toward a particular thing. So it's another either-or fallacy. You're with us or you're with the terrorists. Maintaining a position of moral authority. Throughout these messages, the sender consistently positions themselves as the moral superior party, judging the recipient's compassion and invoking religious principles to support their stance. Oh, yeah. There we go. Emily Pratt again. I do operations. I am the moral superior party because I have the authority to condemn on behalf of people who are gaming the system and actually want to destroy society as we know it within our arrogant little C-suite bubble. Unresolved past issues. The mention of childhood events that the recipient has forgotten about suggests unresolved past issues that are being brought into the current conflict, adding another layer of complexity to the relationship. Oh, yeah, we are not a family. You're not supposed to make friends here. You're not supposed to spend time with us outside of business. We're a business, not a family. But we care about you infinitely. And we have ultimate potential. We're ubermenschens. You know, and of course, by asserting that essentially they have the highest form of godliness, they've proved that they are godless. Just like the conservative Christians who cannot admit that that accepting others is actually Christian. And that's the thing. A lot of these people do not believe they live in glass houses. It's actually the people who have lost everything that have nothing to lose. I feel like I've lost everything. Uh, anyway, but that's the thing. I've actually gained everything spiritually because I've lost everything that I was supposed to get. Because I started to see the flaws in things. I started to see the irony of, at the same time, being pampered, but being all the time told where to go and what to do, as if I was some kind of princess or something like that. I wasn't allowed to be a male adventurer, if you will. Anyway, of course, the conception of gender is largely going to be impressed upon people via this gaslighting by generational wealth people who always take international vacations. Oh, we're talking about, like, Frank Schaeffer's family. um, and Frank Schaeffer was an evangelist, who his son described as preaching at his own funeral and stuff like that, because they put a video of him up. And then, of course, you know Frank Schaeffer had struggled with, being one of the elect, if you will, and then started to not find so much meaning in that particular version of evangelical Christianity. And I guess he found it to be sort of stuffy and not actually holding to the teachings of Christianity, like the like the principles, if you will, as opposed to individual exactamundo beliefs. Every letter of the law, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, every jot and tittle. If you need to know what's going on and what's coming to you all the time, well, then you need a really detailed law. But it also means that you're going to be held to the same law, blah, blah, blah. And why is that? Because people are going to be pissed off at you. Other people besides me are going to notice that they're being used. In Pennsylvania stands up. And that and that they're not just immature, childish, rude, discourteous people. And you are not a Catholic nun either. Difficulty with direct communication. Instead of directly stating their feelings or needs, the center often uses accusatory questions, religious pronouncements, and emotional appeals. Oh, religious pronouncements, very familiar. And emotional appeals, which can hinder healthy communication and resolutions. And that's the thing. No one is actually allowed to state feelings. No one is allowed to express any negative emotions whatsoever in Pennsylvania stands up. Oh my goodness. Are we in Quiverful? Are we in that Duggar family where there's only one emotion allowed? Cheerfulness? How different is that from saying that a woman's place is in the home or that a man's work is never finished? See, it's the principle of the thing. It's the absolute belief system of what role or what office one is supposed to be in. And you cannot see another fellow human being as another fellow human being because everybody's supposed to do what you do and be where you are and know what you know. As they say in Jesus of Nazareth, when John the Baptist is about to be killed, he's like, and they say, who sees us? Who knows us? And then, of course, Jesus sort of turns the question on its head and he's like, who do you say I am? But really, it should be phrased, I'm kind of a teenager. Who am I? I got to find myself, in order to grow up. I got to find out what I really believe in and why I believe in it. Not just how to do things, not just how to follow really specific laws or rules and stuff like that. I got to figure out what really makes me truly free. What really makes me a better thinker? Where did I come from? Where do I go? Where did I come from, Cotton Eye Joe? No, but I'm talking about metaphysical place. Where did I come from? Where did I go? I'm not talking about actual locational place in the physical realm. I'm talking about a place in the mind. And the thing is, the more you exercise your mind by doing mind travel, by going into a meditative state, and by going to other worlds using your mind, that I would say is the true spirit of Star Trek. Because all of these characters in Star Trek are essentially arguments with yourself. That's what's happening in the mind. These are all essentially representative of figments of the mind, not necessarily values in the real world, although they could be applied as values in the real world, because they're philosophies for developing your personal constitution and personal sovereignty, despite say being part of a crew. But your personal sovereignty is not supposed to override the voice of the people. If you're a democratic organization, Pennsylvania stands up as a benevolent dictatorship, like any other corporation. It's not a democracy. Same with, of course, the Democrat Party. But the thing is, until the Democrat Party itself becomes more democratic and not determined in direction by party hacks or experts of any sort, well, you won't be able to reach people. And you'll continue to lose to the Republicans because the Republicans essentially believe in the same thing only privileged, educated people should be in charge of things that require a delicate, exact procedure that follows the letter of the law. Well, that's the thing. If some of you are, trying to talk about the beliefs of Jesus and stuff like that, you know, why can't you just boil it down to a law of love? In other words, that you must love, that you must overlook things, you know, instead of actually invoking laws or the idea that you're supposed to be loved above all things because you contain within yourself um, you know a higher power, a higher position, which becomes your title. And so everybody has to like respect you a lot. Everybody has to grovel before you, because of your experience and stuff like that. Just because things happened to work out for you and you were able to move up the chain. Well, the thing is, if you do not show compassion to like the least of us, then it will prevent you from seeing what's happening now, when the most privileged of vulnerable groups are actually having their rights nixed, if you will. Cis white women, they're trying to purge cis white women from all the agencies now. And the thing is, you didn't see this coming because you're not trans or autistic or a targeted individual, or what's another thing that doesn't have rights yet? I don't know. Somebody who's like, totally outcast. Somebody that's unheard of. Oh, intersex people. That's another one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So difficulty with direct communication. So direct communication is prohibited in Pennsylvania stanza. That's that's interesting. But see, that's the thing. We in American society do not actually know how to communicate with each other anymore because we've had to adopt all these formalities. That it's going to take like half a lifetime. You know, as Wayne Bueller says, to basically learn how to decide who gets what emails at what time and how to talk to who about what, and you know uh, and know when you're supposed to just talk about technical knowledge, and know when you're supposed to be quiet because you're not an expert. Okay. Well, I mean, it seems very straightforward, but the thing is, generally speaking, we can't be vulnerable, we can't be raw, we have to be professionals. But then if we're beginners, or if we're in some inferior position, then we assume that the professionals have unlimited time, unlimited brain space, you know, to take care of us and guide us to the same knowledge they have. Well, that's not their job. Almost nothing is anybody's job if they're a professional. They got to make their money, do what they think is necessary, and then go home. They're not here for you. They're not here for the common people. But at the same time, I would still be willing, perfectly willing to rejoin planning commission or go to city council meetings, with the hope of eventually running for office myself sometime. You know, uh, Still pay attention to the Pennsylvania state legislature. Still pay attention to what's going on in Congress as best I can, but just not all that seriously because I got to give myself a break sometimes. I'll work in small spurts because that suits me. It's not because I'm making excuses to not work consistently. It's just the way I work. And the thing was, I was working on a really big Bazooly project, for Pennsylvania Stands Up. I was going to show Save Our Land, Save Our Towns at 5 different locations. And then we were trying to break it up. And the thing was, I wasn't really good at breaking it up into, the individual components. I was going to invite like hundreds of people from all over the region. I could have achieved regionality like Donna Reed. And that reminds me, just about everywhere that Donna Reed has been, I've been, and like she lived a parallel life with mine. We never actually met, but she was just born an elite um, because of the circumstances that were given to her. And I would have loved to be a newspaper reporter for the Lancaster paper, the Ephrata paper, and the Reading paper. Um, it's not so much that I deserved any sort of recognition. And of course, my band director would always complain that we were all seeking recognition. No. We were just, seeking for a little bit of leveling of the playing field. And so, like, there's sort of like this massive chasm between me and somebody like Donna Reed. It's like I'm in hell and she's in heaven. Or maybe I shouldn't think of it that way. Maybe I should believe that I'm in heaven because I found peace of mind because I know how to live in humble circumstances. I don't need to be on top. I don't need great praise and adulation for, overloading myself so I can't even respond to emails or relate to people. Getting things done the way they're supposed to be done. Oh, is that what really matters most? Or is it relating to the people? Leave your gift at the altar or after you've made peace with some other human being. Because it's the gift that makes the sacrifice, not the altar that makes the sacrifice. So just because you belong to a priestly class and you have vestments and you've never been stripped of them before, and you belong in, an office, which is, the altar, if you will, it doesn't mean, that you're better than anybody, although on paper you are. And that's the thing. So I say on paper, because in our twisted world, essentially legal power equals the word of God. It's used as the word of God because it's been judged to be true, and true in the sense that when it is enacted, it has power behind it. That which is not true does not have true power behind it. I guess I'm a little bit sounding like Mark Passio. Connecting to previous themes, the themes of moral superiority, control, and the use of religious beliefs continue to be prominent The introduction of past grievances and the implicit demand or explicit demand for compassion further illustrate the sender's emotional investment in the situation and their desire to influence the recipient's feelings and actions, particularly regarding Chris. The dynamic remains one where the sender believes they know what is right and are actively trying to steer the recipient towards that understanding. Oh, Mary Zook with Sergei Fox. Interesting. Except not necessarily towards an understanding, towards a deflection that it's really God who's allowing all this, and it's really God who can save you. The cause is the cure. How can something that causes a problem cure a problem? How can how can something that uses demonic forces also be healing? Anyway, this latest exchange reveals a senator who is deeply invested in the situation, feeling morally justified in their perspective, and actively trying to elicit compassionate agreement from the recipient. They employ tactics such as direct accusations, appeals to divine authority, scriptural references, and emotional manipulation. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Okay, I allowed it on purpose to try and learn how it works so I could stop it. I intentionally compromised, thinking I was smart enough to know when to stop. Had even written out a plan on how to deal with the situation, subconsciously gathered information I could use to eventually destroy him. Okay, so Charles is talking about how he was essentially going to destroy the arguments of Sergei. And the thing is, that's the thing. Generally speaking, you don't want to think like that when you're talking to somebody like Sergei, because like he'll have like fear tactics, like really good emotional blackmail tactics, in addition to philosophical knowledge. It's really hard to go up against him. So the thing is, Charles was really idealistic, because of course he thought he had God in him, and therefore he thought he was God, and so he thought he couldn't be defeated. But the thing is, even when he was defeated by Sergei, he still thought he wasn't defeated. So circular logic, because he thought he was God. Anyway, but yeah. But the thing was, I also tried to frame a debate with Sergei before as well. I tried to argue, that I was just, testing him, and I was using the reverse interrogation technique because there was a spy who was caught, an American spy who was caught by the Germans, and he reversed the interrogation by saying, I can't tell you anything until you tell me where I am and what I'm doing here and what your purpose is. So it actually reversed, sort of like the surveillance on the person doing the interrogator. So I sort of used the same technique on Sergey. And the thing is, when I revealed it to him after I got the information I needed, he was really pissed because, of course, he believes that he doesn't deserve to be messed with. He doesn't deserve to be deceived because everyone has always deceived him. And that is the beginning of conspiracy theory thinking. Everybody is part of some kind of new world order who's trying to undermine your transgenderism or whatever unique thing you would like to call yourself. If I were a snowflake, what kind of snowflake would I be? I do not know. I do not know. But the thing is, if you're a unique snowflake, it means that nobody can actually know what you are. Nobody can classify you like, into four evil characteristics and know your entire personality, from those 4 characteristics or less. But see, people like to do that, and they like to paint with a broad brush because they can get away with it. We've never confronted people on getting away with that. And so, people can use that simple classification, that black and white thinking, in order to elevate their own status based on, playing the victim. So Sergei would put himself in a vulnerable position so that he has the excuse to get angry more, to lose control at will, and be considered the most loving, the most kind thing, the most misunderstood thing, the strongest person in the world, the the most resilient type of person there is on the planet. And that's the thing. When it's a man, it's always an excuse for our behavior, just like the Catholic nuns used to say. When it's a woman, it's always a sign of strength and integrity and good character. Let's see. The latest messages provide a significant shift in perspective and reveal more about the sender's internal struggles and the relationship with the figure of authority, Dad. Here's a psychological analysis of these new snippets. Themes and dynamics. Significant shift in focus. Confession of intentional manipulation. The sender admits, my problem was even though I knew Sergei was manipulating me, I allowed it on purpose to try to learn how it works so I could stop it. So essentially, Charles, in his mind, thought he was going to hell and back. He was at the moment of truth. He had a Gethsemane. So he was at the dark pole. So he knew he was close to the end of a cycle, meaning that if he let that belief die, then he could be born again and then go back to Eden, the other pole. Anyway, the other garden watchtower, so to speak. Calculated strategic approach to dealing with manipulation, all but one that the sender now recognizes as flawed. Yep. So he died in that belief because within his mind was the betrayer who actually led him to see the truth, if you will. The one thought actually fell in love with the flawed thought. Interesting. Grandiosity and overestimation of self. The center believed they were smart enough to know when to stop and had a plan of how to deal with the situation. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Grandiosity and overestimation of self. Loss of control and lack of discernment. I went too far and realized I didn't have enough discernment. Okay, that's the thing. Nobody really has discernment. It's just a made up thing, or it's a neurological thing, meaning that essentially autistic people do not have good discernment relative to the general population. We're just different. But of course, conservative Christians, will still remain Christian and conservative, even though if they're autistic, they know that'll allow them to receive a lot of persecution for thinking different. And you know what? They're starting to act like, black people and women are neurodivergent, and that and that you've got to use biological communication to talk differently to a black person than you would a woman, than you would an autistic person, blah blah blah. Well, yeah, I mean, you're supposed to talk differently to an autistic person because, of course, obviously, after time, you realize that an autistic person does receive things differently and does need a different type of communication, but it can become a burden to people who want to determine the rules of communication without actually studying the rules of communication and want to play psychologist or psychiatrist without ever, being one or putting themselves in the shoes of being at the mercy of a psychologist or a psychiatrist, who, of course, of the type who has no mercy, just clinicism, if you can call it that. So that's the thing, why would you want to impose such a strong control system on someone else unless you had a strong hatred of yourself and a hatred for humanity? Anyway. Desire for external validation and accountability. The instruction, "Don't forget to show your church this thread," is a striking admission. It suggests a desire for external validation of their experience and potentially a seeking of accountability or support from their religious community. Oh, yeah, like Bill Clinton from the UUA told me. Yeah, go back to your church and solve your problem of not being able to show up at things. You're just an unreliable person. You're an unreliable person as far as I can see, and I'm going to put you down as an unreliable person on paper. And so it's a surface interpretation, but the thing is, it works. We're a business, not a charity. We need good business people. We need good workers. If you don't deliver results, you don't get a job. Okay. But professionalism doesn't allow you to give people the chance that they didn't have for a lot of their lives if they weren't so privileged. And then those people end up doing invisible labor. As Andrew Yang says in The War on Normal People, he says, companies never pick people who are down on their luck. They always pick the best employees. They always pick the most privileged employees, the most egotistical, narcissistic employees. At times, as we found out in Walmart, the ones who don't really care about the job because they don't get burned out. They can deliver consistent but small amounts. Whereas the people who really care about the job, they get burned out really quick. And of course, those people have the high IQs, and of course you wonder what they're doing there. But it was most likely because they were marginalized. They were lowered there by somebody who had the power to guarantee that they were lowered. And of course, that's where Jesus says, only God can really, lower somebody who's God to trash status, if you will. Of course, Jesus didn't act like he was God, in front of somebody like Pilate. He just said, the sun also rises. Whatever. Die today, live tomorrow. I'll make my comeback. Anyway, these were referring to thoughts, desires, distractions, things that keep us from attaining that higher level of consciousness, the fourth or fifth dimensional consciousness. That, of course, is why one would ascend in the mind. And of course, de facto leave the earth, but still be physically present on the earth, in this world, but not of this world. Seeing the commonality between all people, as in samadhi, and obtaining moksha liberation. And then, of course, having their eye on the prize, which of course is nirvana. I will.
So you just about, you gotta eat, and then you gotta put that in there.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'll just see where I left off. Yeah. Self-perceived need for correction. Okay.